Hi folks, it's Florida Man here, and if there's one thing I love more than I love diplomacy, it's my country, America. So today, in honor of American independence, we're going to go through some strategic maxims from one of the wisest Americans, one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin. Without further ado, let's begin. Number 1. Love your enemies, for they tell you your faults. The first part of this quotation is clearly a riff on Christianity, but the second part of it is what makes it unique to Franklin. An honest enemy can be valuable, for a number of reasons. If you have a player you've made an enemy of, and that player is still alive in the game for a significant period afterward, there's a good chance you made some sort of mistake. If that's the case, that player might arrogantly gloat about your mistakes. More likely, though, that player will angrily rant about whatever you did to make them your enemy. You can learn a lot from getting other people angry or upset at you, and since diplomacy is a game that relies on the player's charm and persuasion skills, anytime you make someone upset by your actions, and they're still around in the game, I would suggest you've made a mistake somewhere in how you handled your play. And one thing you can rely on from a player you've really ticked off is that they're likely to be honest about what they didn't like. If you're willing to listen, there's a good chance your enemies will tell you your faults loudly, in all capital letters. Number 2. 3 may keep a secret, if 2 of them are dead. The applicability of this expression to the game of diplomacy is obvious, so I won't belabor the point. Loose lips sink ships, as another version of the same expression goes. Every person who's aware of your plans is a threat to those plans, because many people in diplomacy will leak information to other players whenever it seems like it might be convenient. And some people will do it accidentally because they're bad at secrets. My secret plan to betray Germany is only discussed on a need-to-know basis, and if I don't need your actual direct help to do it, you really don't need to know. Number 3. Lost time is never found again. The application of this to diplomacy is that you have to move quickly in getting things done, or you'll lose the opportunity to do them forever. If you don't communicate to a certain player early on, you lose the chance to make a favorable early impression. If you don't settle the war in your region quickly, you will end up on the defensive. And if you don't grab dots quickly, other people might get all the dots. Make good use of your time, because you won't get any more. Number 4. He that can have patience can have what he will. The flip side of the last quotation, Franklin is here advocating for patience as the way to get anything you want. In the American Revolution, the American colonists were continually fighting against superior enemies, but because they cared more about keeping their country than the enemy did, they could be patient essentially for as long as necessary. Eventually, it became too difficult for the British government to juggle the American Revolution with its other priorities, and the patience of their side ran out, which is why the war didn't continue until the British won. The need for patience is also a real issue in diplomacy. So many players have trouble waiting to pull off a stab until the right moment, and they suffer for it. If you have the patience to wait for the right moment to do something, a single stab can frequently give you a solo. This is not the same as losing time by waiting too long to do something, because patience is an investment in your plan, whereas just waiting too long to do something hurts you rather than helping. The patience principle also applies to having patience when you're trying to make a stop-the-leader alliance work. You might want revenge for someone's earlier betrayal, but if you can't put it on hold for a few years, you'll end up shooting yourself in the foot instead of improving your situation. Number 5. The wise man draws more advantage from his enemies than the fool from his friends. In diplomacy, you would not expect it to be true that you can gain advantage from your enemies. However, there are a number of ways you can do it. During the American Revolution, one of the main reasons France became a supporter of the United States was that our opponent in that war was the despised British Empire, France's rival. The enemies of your enemy may feel pushed into becoming your friends. That is one advantage of having an enemy that other people already want to fight. Another advantage you can gain from your enemies is that their behavior might be predictable. If you give them information that leads them into thinking they have a certain way of attacking you, you can pretty much count on them to pursue that attack. And if you can find ways of feeding your enemy false information, they'll then pass that on to their allies as fact. And if your enemy says something to their ally, it will have much more credibility than if you yourself made the statement, for obvious reasons. Number 6. Little strokes fell great oaks. This is another piece of advice that I relate directly to the American Revolution. The British Empire was the largest empire of all time, but the Americans won a war with the British, one fight at a time, by slowly wearing away at them. In diplomacy, the same principle frequently applies. If there's a neighbor you need to cut down to size, finding a way to knock him out of 1 or 2 dots is a good first step. Then maybe you'll pretend to make peace and be content, and you chisel away a couple more. Before your enemies had time to really process the situation, you're a little bigger than them, and those little advantages are frequently decisive in a conflict. Number 7. Wise men don't need advice. Fools won't take it. This is an interesting reflection in that it's frequently true, but I don't always agree with what it would seem to suggest for your behavior. Wise men and women frequently do want advice, which is actually one of the marks of wisdom in my book. However, the second part of the quotation is absolutely true, and absolutely a cautionary note to remember in a game of diplomacy. If you give someone who's not wise to the ways of diplomacy good advice, it might very well make you look suspicious to them, instead of suggest to them that you have their best interests in mind. So consider this a cautionary warning. Be careful about giving advice in diplomacy. My own usual policy is to only give advice when I'm fairly certain the other person would actually want it, or when they explicitly ask for it. Even then, I have to think carefully about what I'm going to say, and how much that will reveal about my own plans. Number 8. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. This sounds like it's probably about education, and it can be, but it's also worth noting that in 1775, the Second Continental Congress created the Committee of Secret Correspondence, essentially a spying organization that PBS describes as a forerunner of the CIA. Benjamin Franklin was one of the original members. An investment in knowledge could also be considered as an investment in intelligence, and I think the value of intelligence in diplomacy almost speaks for itself. Knowing who's likely to attack you, who might be looking for an ally, and who's ready to turn on whom, is generally valuable stuff. It's well worth chatting a little, and doing a favor or two, to get that information. Number 9. Diligence is the mother of good luck. This is another quotation that would seem to relate both to diplomacy and to the conduct of the Revolutionary War. Diligence is defined as careful and persistent work or effort, and it was a key to continuing a war effort with hardly any funding, very little in the way of a professional military, and a chronic shortage of men. Working at improving your position, even when the potential return on investment seems low, is one of the marks of a great diplomacy player. That's how you turn around a losing position, how you turn a middling position into a strong position, and how you turn a strong position into a likely-to-win position. You keep working at improving your relationship with every power, keep building your influence, keep compounding your strategic advantages. Keep your enemies divided and your allies closely united. Don't let things slide because you feel like the momentum is on your side. Diligence is what makes the difference between victory and defeat. One reason why great diplomacy players will still sometimes get destroyed in a game is the tendency, once you've got a certain amount of experience, a certain number of victories under your belt, to become complacent and put in less effort. You can't afford to do that in your journey to become great. Number 10. Well done is better than well said. There are a number of great interpretations you can take from this saying. One is that your grand plans are only worth so much. Grand strategy is valuable, but it quickly becomes worthless if the execution is lacking. Another way of interpreting it is that you should pay attention to what people do rather than what they say, and if you do, you'll be well served in the long run. Yet another is that other people will evaluate you that way, and if your words stray too often from your actions, people will eventually stop taking your proposals seriously. I hope you enjoyed this very patriotic Strategic Maxims style video, inspired by good old Benjamin Franklin. If you did, please feel free to support the continuance and expansion of this content with your likes, your subscribes, your comments. Interested in hearing what other founding fathers you would like to see Strategic Maxims style advice from, perhaps next 4th of July. And you can also support this channel through Patreon or Ko-Fi or by writing subtitles for the videos, as these very loyal fans of the channel have done. Most importantly, though, have a great weekend. Enjoy the 4th of July, even if you're not American. Florida Man, out.